My Corset but I think it's and I think yeah, you know, do you yeah, like I basically just like pushed out that scene to make it more. I didn't have energy from street class, like drawing, but like it was kind of like that. Like, okay. Okay, everybody come over here. And y'all might want to get on that side unless you want to be recorded on camera. I'll be in the back. I'm gonna make sure that I'm not gonna be like weird. Okay. This guy's on. There you go. Is there water ready to pour? I'll pour it out of there. No, it's facing the form. Oh, it's facing 5, 6, the corner. It's not ready. I heard 5. Maybe a shake. We'll have both. Okay. Just 5. Oh, where's my phone? Nowhere. I like rejuvenating. I know I'll just keep really good. Yeah, I don't know. Whenever it's in with my friend who's under 5 feet, I feel like it's something like very sure. I'm like, she's way pointier. But the front form that's pointier. I know. Just anything project. Yeah, but if you just want to turn it in, I mean, that's right. I fixed my out. Like I feel like I could get earlier, but it works on the ones that are like a specific dress in there. It works on her. Yeah, and I will go for very class. Oh, yeah, that's one of those things. So, yeah, like, yeah, I've been like dress. Yeah, I thought my test was Tuesday, but that's more yeah, so it's kind of like. Oh, I haven't tried on a video like service. She's really stressy. So, oh, I did. I thought it'd be like. That was weird. No later than 9. Okay. Yeah. Oh, no. We're still on camera. Here we go. Good this way. There we go. Okay. Sorry. I'm just gonna sit him over here. Oh, I overtook that like this. I feel like this is so weird. It's like chopping off my head. Okay, let's go ahead and get started. So today we're going to be fitting our boning to our foundation layer. So the first thing we're gonna have to do is cut our boning. This one is still much pointier. These busts are much pointier. So these aren't gonna, this isn't gonna fit this form perfectly. I'll have to figure out what form my sloper was made for. but she's got some pointy boobs. So we're gonna fit it to the actual fabric instead of the form, but we're gonna start cutting our boning to the correct lengths that we're gonna need, and then molding it to the correct shape of the bust. So this is a plastic boning that we're using. And so we're going to use heat and just forming it with our hands, letting it cool while it's in that shape to help it form to the bust. The other areas that we've got this, our side seams, princess seam in the back, and then center back are all going to be pretty flat and straight. So all we have to do is take out the curve of this boning to get that nice and straight. And then on that front princess is where we're going to have to really form it to the bust. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is measure out and cut all of our lengths of boning. This is going to get cut to the full length of the seam, including the seam allowance right now, because we need that extra length in our casing. So I'm just going to lay it out and cut it to that full length. And then I can take my little plastic piece out and cut off an inch because I'm taking the seam allowances off of the plastic, but not off of the fabric casing. So cut off that extra inch. And at this point, I'm gonna not be able to do this in the lab because I can't have fire, but at this point you would want to melt your ends to not sharp, because right now you've got these pointy corners. The other thing that you can do if you don't have a lighter at home is a nail file, and do a nail file and file down the corners so that they're not pointy. You just want this to be nice and curved so that it doesn't poke into your skin when you're wearing it. Okay?
Wait, how curved?
Like a little, just take off those sharp, sharp corners. You want it to be nice and smooth at the top. Okay, and then you're going to heat it up with steam. So you can put it underneath a press cloth, get it nice and hot so that it's more malleable. And then you're gonna use your hands to just get it as flat as possible for those flat seams. So right now it still has a little bit of a curve in it, so I'm just gonna work with it to get it flattened out. While it's still warm, I can also put it underneath something heavy and flat to let it cool in that flat position, okay? So make sure you don't get mixed up on which plastic goes to which casing. So I like to put them back in and keep them together so that I don't accidentally mix them up. But that is my back princess one. We need one for center back. So you'll do 2 back princess, 2 center backs. We will have a boning right at center back, just inside our grommet area. So cut 2 at that length. Two back princess. And then when we get to our front princess, I'm gonna move this. Nope, stop it. I'm gonna see what I'm doing. Okay. So when we get to our front princess, it needs to go along that seam allowance and fill in that full curve. So make sure that as you're measuring it, that you're really pushing it all the way into that curve and you're not going more shallow than the actual curve of your piece. So I'm going to cut it to that length, and I'll need 2 of those, and then we're going to start forming this to the bust. Like I said, my pattern is a little curvier, pointier than my dress form over here. I'm going to start with this to give me a general shape, and then I can compare it to my muslin and make it even pointier because this one is more so. Okay. Go over here. There we go. Okay, so now I'm going to take one of those princess pieces and I'm going to put it right over that bust area. And mine, let's see how far down mine's going. It's going to go right to that natural way. So I know where to make my piece land. Okay, so I'm going to start from bottom up since I know the waist of my piece is going there. And start curving it. I'm going to get this nice and hot. Just using her as a press cloth. I should have a separate one. Okay, so now while she's hot, start molding her to that bust. While she's there, I'm going to pin her. Where'd my pins go? And you can't pin straight through the plastic. So I always just pin at an angle through my thing. So it just kind of holds it down through my form is what I was trying to say. So the tip of my pin just holds it down into the place where I put it. And I will let it cool here for a second. And then once I do that, again, I'll take it off, compare it to my fabric, and get that bust even pointier since my my foundation layer doesn't exactly match my form right now. Ideally, you would be doing this to a form that does match. You would be making your corset for a specific person or for a specific form. Just for ease of time, because we have a limited amount of time for this project, we did not make our slopers or our patterns for a specific form. So I'm not going to be measuring it. Like I'm not going to be fitting it to a specific form when I grade. Okay. It's just going to be based off of your paper patterns. But we would normally pattern it and fit it to a specific body or a specific form.
What would you do if you don't have a form that size and you're somebody custom?
If you're doing custom, you would have to pad out your form to get it to that person's body measurements.
So there's no way to like form it without body.
Without this, I mean, without this, yes, you can. It's just a little bit more trial and error of forming it with your hands, comparing it to the sewn seam, and just going back and forth until it really fits the sewn seam well.
Since yours were nice patterns, do you want them to be like
patterns? Yeah, so when you turn in your garment, you're going to turn in finished patterns and your working patterns. So the original working patterns, when you did the contour lines and did slash and overlap, all of that, you'll have those. And those don't have seam allowances on them. They're the original working patterns. And then you're also going to have your 3 color-coded final patterns. Yes. So black for the shell, blue for lining, and the purple for the foundation layer.
We're done to like super clean.
Yeah. Super clean. Okay, let's check this. See where we're at. So now we've got that contoured shape. Again, I'm going to compare it to my fabric. And she needs a little bit more curve here at the top, I can see. So I'm going to continue heating her up with some steam. So right now I'm not putting my iron all the way down flat on the plastic because I don't want to melt the plastic and I don't want to take out that shape we already put in. I'm just trying to get it steamed and hot so I can continue forming it.
So the working patterns don't have seam allowances?
Correct. Yeah, just your final patterns need to have, I mean, if they do have seam allowances, it's not a ginormous deal, but you don't have to put seam allowances on the working patterns. You do have to put seam allowances on the final patterns. Okay, so I've got one here. I'm going to do the same with my other. I'm just going to do 1/2 of my foundation for demonstration so you can see, but you would do obviously the same thing for the other half. Okay, so I've got that one formed with its casing, the completely flat one for my back princess. That's the other front. You should be the other princess. Okay, so now a center back one. And that one's going to be completely flat as well.
Take that an inch off of all of it.
Yes, I do. Thank you for the reminder. I need to go back and do that. I was like, yeah, that one is long. Just on the plastic, yes, you're cutting off that extra inch. So your fabric should be an inch longer than your actual plastic when you put them back together.
Do you cut off the inch before you shape it?
Yes. Yeah, and I forgot to do that on my princess one. So right now, I don't want to cut off an inch and make it too short in one direction. So I'll do 1/2 inch on either side since I forgot to do it at the beginning. There we go. I'll have to pick those up. Is this the one I got hot? No, here it is. Thank you, Alicia. Okay, we'll let this cool flat for a second. And then I trimmed this one. So now I should be good, except trimming that one. Okay. I'm going to put these back together just so I don't forget which one belongs to which. So cut them to the length, trim off an inch of the plastic, file down your corners or melt down your corners, and then form it to the shape of the princess seam or flat for the other seams. Okay, let's take this over to our machine and we will start stitching on our casings. One, see, I feel like I'm missing, oh, I didn't do a side seam, that's what it was. That's too long, let me do one more.
I'm sorry. What about your social? Right. It's important over it. Yeah. Time for maps.
That day will come much sooner if you don't sleep, though. I get it. I know the struggle. I know. I understand. I know. It's much easier said than done. Yeah, I agree with that.
Then I look at the clock and it's like 2 a.m. and I'm like, wait, I was just 8 o'clock.
Since when? Yeah.
It just sat down.
Okay. Erin, since you're right there, can you slide down that little, yeah, all the way down?
Okay, so I'm not sitting by the concert. I'm a yeah. I think I'd be great at raves. Yeah, I've never been to one. Neither. Yeah, we should do a weekend trip one day. I think that'd be so fun. Well, when you turn 21, we can have like a cute little dinner instead. We could have the rooftop bar. Rooftop bars are so fun. I know a place and they have like good pictures. Like picture things and it's like this. So it's like a good gram. Yeah. I used to dress up in the cute. And then like the view of Dallas at night.
Yeah. I really want to, the House of Blues in Dallas sometimes has like Taylor Swift themed nights. I really want to do that.
Okay, let's get started over here. Okay, so the first one we're going to put on is center back. And then we'll kind of work our way in. So this is my center back one. It needs to be inside my seam allowance. So that 1/2 inch seam allowance. Oh, no, foundation doesn't have a seam allowance. Sorry. Foundation does not have a seam allowance. I correct myself. I was like, why does this look weird? Okay, so this one would be inside your seam allowance once it's stitched to your garment. But on your foundation, we took off that center back seam allowance. So it's going to be right up against the edge. And we're going to take out our plastic for now. And then that excess that you have on either end is what you're going to turn under to make sure that your plastic is not going to slide around while it's in there. So I'm going to turn under that 1/2 inch seam allowance right there at the top so that it's out of my seam allowance. I'm only going to do one end for now because I still need to be able to slide my plastic back in there. We're going to lay this right along that center back seam. And for now, we'll leave this side untucked. And we're going to stitch this on with an edge stitch on either side. So there are stitch lines where this casing was put together on either side of your casing. So we're stitching right on top of those. We don't want to stitch inside those because then we're making our casing smaller and our plastic won't fit back in. So we have to stitch right on top of those lines. Okay, I've got my zipper foot on my machine. And that is so that later when we have our plastic in there, we'll have to close up the very end of our casing with the plastic in there. So we want to make sure that we're able to stitch kind of next to the plastic. So I'm going to do this with my zipper foot. You could do this first portion with a standard foot and then switch to your zipper foot later, or you could just use your zipper foot for the whole thing, whatever makes you comfortable. But I'm going to start right there on the edge, and we're just going to do an edge stitch down either side. Here. The older versions of these machines are not nearly as quiet as the new one.
But these you can't even adjust the speed. Yeah, I tried sewing this on myself.
Yeah.
It was fun. But...
Okay, so I'm going to stop a good inch before I get to my stitch line. So not the cut edge, an inch before I get to my stitch line, because I need to give myself enough room to be able to slide in my plastic and then tuck under that seam allowance. So right here, I'm going to go ahead and stop and back stitch. And I'm going to switch over to the other side.
An inch.
marked seam allowance line?
Yes, before the marked seam allowance, not an inch before the cut edge. Okay, so I've got that stitched on there, but again, that last portion is unstitched right now. That's going to allow me to put in my plastic and fold under that seam allowance before finishing the ends. So I'm going to do this with each of my casings, and then I'll go finish them all at the very end. Okay, so next is my back princess. Keep all of your plastics organized and labeled so that you don't accidentally put the wrong one in the wrong sleeve later. They should be slightly different lengths, but depending on how you designed your neckline, there might be two, especially these two back ones, that are very close in length, and you don't want to mix them up. Okay, on these where you're on a seam, you want to make sure to get it right over the center of that seam. So it'll be right in the middle of your two seam allowances. This is especially important when you are doing a two-layer corset where the stitch lines of where you applied the boning are going to be visible on the outside, or in some of y'all's cases, if you've got the sheer shell, you're going to see those stitch lines. So you really want to make sure that they're even on either side of your seam.
Those fabrics, could we pick a colored thread for this part since you can see it through?
You can, but any little mistakes or if those stitch lines are not perfectly even, it's going to be a lot more visible if it's a contrasting thread. So just be aware of that you'll have to be even more careful.
Are you still across the top or just?
Nope, just up the two sides. Yeah, the top is already finished and closed because it's folded. Yeah. Okay, next is my side seam. These flat ones are a lot easier. Once we get to the curved one, it gets a little more challenging.
Like
Mm-hmm. Do you have a question? No? Okay.
I thought that for a second the thing wasn't stitching, and I.
Oh, no.
That's so cute. Dobby.
Alex sent it to me.
Did you request it?
It's for me. I was having a really
All of them you're stopping like an inch before.
At the end, yeah.
You guys are
Yeah.
so cute.
On this side, because I've tucked under my seam allowance, I can go all the way to the end of the casing. But on the bottom side where it's open and you're going to slide in your plastic, that's the one you have to leave open.
Okay. And you said like an inch away from the seam allowance.
Yeah. Yes. Okay, when we get to our curved area, you may want to use a ham to help you kind of basically invert this curve so that it's pointed out or pointed towards your skin. And then we're going to pin. And if you have shorter pins, it may make your life easier. These are really long pins, so when I go to stitch, they're gonna kind of push out and fill out that curve. If you have little short ones, it'll allow you to curve a little bit more easily. So that is optional though. We're just gonna fill in this curve and really make sure that our fabric is lying flat to the curve of that bust. Okay. And then just like we're doing when we ease, we're gonna really have to curve this fabric as we feed it into the machine because we don't want any of this to turn into tucks. So I'm gonna start here, lift up in front of my foot, and then I'm using my finger right in front of the foot to make sure that that casing is really lying flat to my fabric. And I can adjust it as I go if I feel like it's not. So really push it into that curve. Make sure that it's fully filling the curve, that you don't have any gaps or any tucks. Oh no, my thread broke.
Yeah. That's how we saw. I'm really good at that.
Okay, once you get that princess seam done, double check on the other side that it did not turn into any tucks. So you'll see right now, this is not completely perfect where my seams are super even on either side of my stitch lines are super even on either side of my seam. For an opaque shell, that is okay because you're not going to see these. They're going to be completely hidden. We want to get it as even as possible, but it doesn't have to be perfect. When you have those visible stitch lines, the sheer people, y'all are going to have to be a lot more careful. Make sure it gets really nice and even. And I would suggest using a matching thread because it's going to hide any small unevenness. Okay. Now we're going to I'm going to trim all of my little thread tails and then we'll start putting our plastic back in there and closing up the ends. Okay, so let's start putting our little plastic pieces back in. Make sure you're putting them facing the right direction so that your bust is curving out and not in. You're just gonna slide it on in there. It may take a little bit of pushing because your casing will be a little bit tighter than it originally was. So it just takes a little bit of working it in there. My corners are also pokey right now. When your corners are not pokey, it should slide in a little bit smoother because your corners aren't getting caught on your fabric. She doesn't want to go past this hump. My pokey corners are getting caught. What is it? Oh, no. Almost there. I've got like half an inch left. Or just oh yes. Okay. There she is. She's in.
This is all the shells you can
I need to trim a bit more here. You may have to trim a little bit more plastic off depending on how tight your thing is fitting in there. So mine is in there pretty tight, but it's still my plastic is sticking past my stitch line. So you can trim off more at this point, but you'll have to remelt your end if you do. So don't forget about that. And then we're going to tuck under our seam allowance and get that ready to be stitched. Okay, we're going to do that for each of them. That curved one is going to be the harder one to get in. These straight ones should be a little easier to slide in. Let's test that theory now. My pokey corner tore through the fabric. And this is why you file your corners. This is what you get for skipping. Yeah, not only will it be painful, you'll also mess up your entire case. I have to put a new one on. Thank you for tracking down my stray plastic case.
Do you see it?
Oh, that's embarrassing. You like flew away. Okay, so look at, I don't know, y'all can't see that on camera, but it tore a big old hole in my casing because my corner was not filed. And the like pokey corner just tore a big old hole. So that is part of the reason that we do the corners. Let's get her back in. Now let's be more careful. Yeah. Trim off. Yes. Is it? Yeah.
Just see if my sister would want to do it tomorrow or Saturday. What was that if you guys for like a dinner?
I'll see either day works good for me.
I do have get it in my hair. But I don't know. Oh, tomato. I think a Friday or Saturday. Well, something like that.
I think
on Friday I do have work. No, that's what I was asking. Like, she drives it tomorrow, and I don't know how like. So
yeah, that's
so it's
valid.
me tomorrow or Saturday.
How far is the drive here?
7 hours. But she's not driving. She's not driving. She's driving with her family friends who comes up, and that's why she's coming up. Because my sister cannot stay awake while she drives. Like max she can do is half. Okay. Well, max she can do is like an hour, but.
Okay, to finish up our little ends, we're just going to use our zipper foot to go along the edge. There. Okay, so you need to make sure that the whole of your zipper foot is facing your plastic. I'm now bleeding. And then just let it run right along that very end. That last inch. You're just going to do that on either side to close up each of those, okay? If your zipper foot is like pushing you away from the casing, you can attempt to do it on top. Just experiment with it and see what works best for you. You don't obviously want to stitch through the actual plastic. You just want to be able to stitch right next to it. So figure out what works for you, what you think is easiest as far as operating the machine, and finish and close up those ends. Okay, once we've got that done, we're going to layer up all of our pieces and we're going to baste. I'm not going to actually do it because I still need to put in the rest of my boning. Let me go wash my.
She's bleeding. Yeah, she was like, not bleeding. I was just like, no. She said it. She's like, I'm not bleeding. I was like,
Dude, if I cut myself, I'd be like,
how am I not bleeding? You better.
no, you're right.
I literally looked there. She's like, I'm not bleeding. I was like, I was like, nobody caught her. Said that to me. I was like, yeah, I thought she said something else. That it's so scary. It's so cute. You guys mind if I let you know more? I feel like anybody with Just give me at least an hour heads up so I can make this.
I'll like once she like gets into town, I'll figure it out.
Make it presentable.
I know. I have that problem. But I mean, I feel like during the summer,
It's probably gonna end up being my sushi or something because I also know she likes that better.
There's a really good Ohana that also has ramen.
Is it fried different?
and then
No,
it's
it's
like blue underliner.
I don't know why, but it's probably not. But it's like in this little flower. It's so cute.
You're okay. Coordination is not working today.
Are you okay?
I'm good. Yeah, I got it myself with my shears when I was cutting.
Wait, what happened?
Yeah, when I was cutting little plastic tip off, the tip of my shears got my finger, and then I was like, I'm just gonna bleed all over this thing if I continue. Right. Okay, so we're going to, after you get all of your boning pieces on, we're going to stack up our 3 layers. So the way this is going to stack up, everybody look up here. So I'm looking at the inside of my shell right now. And then I'm going to lay my foundation layer. Again, looking at the inside of this, line up those seams. You should have that empty portion here where your seam allowance is going to go. Get mine lined up. Okay, and you're going to do that across the full piece. And then on the inside, you should have your lining layer. And this one will be looking at the right side of the fabric. So these two, you're looking at the wrong side. This one, you're looking at the right side. And this is the part that's going to touch your skin. Okay. So we're going to line up all of those seams. Make sure to pin it to where those seams on all 3 layers are stacking up. And then we're just going to do a simple basting stitch along our neckline and our edge. On the center back, we want to stitch the lining and the shell right sides together. So we'll do that first, and then we'll go do our basting on the other 3 layers, okay? Let's actually take the foundation out right now so we can do this. I was thinking about the zipper and I forgot that we're doing grommets, so we need to do this first. Okay, so we'll do this first. Right sides together, 1/2 inch here. Seam allowance up the center back.
So we should do this too, just the lining and the shell.
Yes,
okay.
Do this first. I just was out of order because I was thinking about zipper, which is what we used to do.
This is also a basting stitch?
No, this one is a regular 1/2 inch permanent stitch. Okay, so before we stack up the layers, we'll do this.
And would this set be the same for those of us with that? Shells?
Yes, because your foundation is still going to be, like, it's still going to sit in between. Yeah.
We don't need to be like a French. Right.
No, because this will get tucked in, like you can put your foundation to where it hides the seam allowance.
Okay.
Okay, so this is my shell and my lining. I've just got those 2 layers. I took out my foundation. And we're stitching the shell and the lining right sides together here. And we're going to do this on both back sides. And this is a regular not basting stitch. No, it's not stitching. Actual heck. It's one of those days. Why did it stop? Oh no, because my bobbin's empty. Of course you would. We're just gonna pretend like it's stitched. Okay, my bobbin ran out of thread, so we're gonna pretend like she's stitched, and I'm gonna pin her together. This part you will most likely need to use your zipper foot for as well, because you will be stitching right up next to the boning when you do your foundation. Okay, so she's stitched. We're gonna flip her right side out and press the edge so that you cannot see the lining. So press it right on that seam. And now we can put our foundation in there. So foundation's gonna sit in the middle. This is where the sheer people, they can put that seam allowance underneath their foundation so that it's not visible, the outside, okay? So put it underneath, and then it's gonna be shell and foundation are facing outward, away from the skin. Lining is facing in towards the skin. And then now that we've got center back finished and all 3 layers stacked up, we'll go do our basting stitch along the neck edge and the hem edge, and it needs to be less than a 1/2 inch. So typically about a 1/4 inch is good. Doesn't have to be exact as long as it's not at that 1/2 inch, because you don't want it showing when we put our binding on later. Okay. So base those 3 layers together. And then next class, what we'll do is we'll come together and we will put on our bias binding on the neck edge and the hem edge. And then we will put in the grommets.
What did you say about the sheer people?
So if you have a sheer shell, when you're going to put the foundation layer in between, so after you've sewn up center back, you flipped it right side out, and now you're putting your foundation layer in between, just make sure to tuck these 2 seam allowances underneath the foundation so that it's not visible when you put the shell, like when you have this on top. You can't see those seam allowances. Okay.
Do you sew both center backs?
Yes, so both center backs.
Can you leave this in the box?
Yeah, I can. I'm gonna get it actually. I'm gonna finish putting my boning in there and get it actually put together so that y'all can see what it looks like.
And then after that, what do you start stitching? Like on
Basting.
Oh, okay.
Then you go in and you base that and you base that.
Oh, so there's gonna be nothing else on the side.
Not right now. Yeah, so this is already stitched right now. Later we'll put our grommets
You
through.
want us base like just like a 1/2 inch thing, right?
Here. It's not a base here or here.
The bottom. Yeah.
This, it's gonna be basting less than 1/2 inch.
Oh,
You don't want it right at the 1/2 inch because you don't want it visible later. Like a 1/4 inch, yeah. You want to do both. I just did one to show y'all, but you do want to do both.
Do you do them both at the start?
Yeah, you can do them both at the same time, and then you'll have the whole neck and the whole hem to just flip it, and then and then just put your foundation in.
So just gonna slide it
in between and match up the seams. Okay.
I have a question. For the sheer, will this raw edge be visible?
It will.
Okay.
But in the end, like it's gonna get tucked here. If you wanted to do, try to think for yours. It will be visible, but it's gonna also get
Like
secured in there. Like it's gonna get here, and then when we put our grommets here,
so it's
gonna be really secured in there.
It's not gonna be like
no.
Okay.
And it's not gonna get friction to like fray over time.
Okay, cool.
Either. It'll be enclosed. I'm just covered in lint now. Okay, I'm gonna refill my bobbin so that I can actually stitch this, and then y'all can see what it looks like once it's actually stitched and not just pinned.
I do have a question on this. I do also. So mine is pointy, but I'm not too sure which pattern it would change.